Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the TradeStation Masterclass. My name is Jesus Nava. I'm the Director of Client Training and Education for TradeStation Securities. It's always a pleasure to be here talking about TradeStation's technology. EasyLanguage is TradeStation's proprietary programming language. It allows you to customize indicators and customize strategies, make them do what it is that you want them to do. A lot of times we look at indicators and strategies out of the box, and we think about variations of that same study and strategy and think to ourselves, what if this indicator would do this? Or what if I could configure the strategy to do that? EasyLanguage allows you to do precisely that, be able to go inside the study or go inside the strategy and make those modifications. All studies and strategies inside of TradeStation are available for you to open up, look at the EasyLanguage code, and have the ability to modify that code and make it exactly what you need it to be. Today, we're going to talk about trend lines and how to draw them programmatically. Many times we just use the drawing tool on the drawing menu, the trend line drawing tool, and we manually draw that trend line. You're looking from a low to a low or from a high to a high and a downtrend. But interestingly, there is a way for you to draw those lines programmatically. And we're going to take a look at the syntax today on how you can accomplish that. But before we jump over to today's topic, let's go and cover some of the disclosures. Just keep in mind that every symbol and idea that I talk about is for educational purposes only. These are not recommendations of TradeStation. Also, active trading is not suitable for everyone, and past historical performance is no guarantee of future results. If anybody needs additional information on these disclosures, go to www.tradestation.com/important-information. Okay, I'm going to jump right to my TradeStation platform and show you a few things that are already built into the TradeStation platform that help you, draw trend lines or draw anything on the TradeStation chart. Let me go ahead and change the symbol here. I was looking at Microsoft just a moment ago, but we can look at any symbol that we want to. This is Apple as an example. All right, so trend lines, you find them in the drawing menu. Of course, we have a comprehensive drawing menu with all different tools. Some of these tools are ways for you to highlight the charting. For example, a rectangle, an ellipsis, they mark certain areas of the chart that you find it interesting. There are other drawing tools that are a little bit more of an analytical nature. For example, if you use the Andrews pitchfork or the Gann fan or any of the Fibonacci drawing tools, there is a little bit of a mathematical calculation behind it, and that's what determines the lines. But whatever you use, it's going to require some interpretation, some analysis for you to determine what is it that this drawing tool is trying to tell me. Trendlines is a tool that is very easy to use. I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And it requires 2 clicks. It requires for you to select where the trend line is going to begin and where the trend line is going to end. I may choose the low of this bar just to provide some nice stuff, and then click on the low of this other bar. Okay, and you can see how the most recent candlesticks have been sitting on top of that trend line for the past few days. Now, I can just leave that trend line and wait for the prices to break under that trend line and maybe analyze that as a trading opportunity. But the thing is that for you to draw that trend line, you must have clicked on 2 different prices. One of the things, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but if you click on the line that you just drew, TradeStation will display some white boxes or white markings along this trend line. 2 of those little boxes are bigger than the rest. If you look at my trend line, the one that is at the very beginning and the one that aligns with the price that I clicked on, those are the 2 points that are a little bit bigger than the rest. We call those 2 points the anchor points because they determine the slope of the trend line, and you can move them to any different location. From there, the line can extend it to the right or it can extend to the left. In this example, we have it extending to the right, which is one of the defaults that I have on my trend line. But you can make your trend line any default. And if you wanted to truncate it so that it goes from point A to point B, that is also something that you can do. The remaining little white dots are just there as an indicator that what you clicked on is currently selected. You can do many things once the item is selected. You can remove it like pressing delete on the keyboard removes that trend line from my screen. One of the bad things about the TradeStation desktop is that it doesn't have an undo. I wish there was a Control Z kind of keyboard shortcut that I could use in order to undo my last action, because many times, for example, right now, I removed my trend line. It would have been very nice for me just to do Control Z and bring it back, but the TradeStation desktop does not support undo. So here I'm going to have to go to the drawing menu one more time and go to trend line and do the exact same thing that I just did a moment ago. Okay. One of the things that is happening right here on my trend line, and I'm going to demonstrate this by clicking and dragging, is that my trend line is being anchored automatically to price data that is on the candles. Meaning that if I wanted to remove this anchor point from the candlestick itself, I don't have the ability to do so. Let me click on this anchor point. I'm going to try to bring it down, and you can see that it doesn't follow my cursor. I'm clicking, holding, and I drag down, and notice that line does not move. The reason for that is because there is a functionality in TradeStation that's called snap mode that makes any drawing tool pretty much snap to or attach to the closest candle on that vertical axis. That snap mode feature is right here on the drawing menu, and you see it towards the bottom. It's called snap mode. You can see that it has a blue outline around the box, letting me know that it's turned on. If I click on snap mode right now, it'll disable it, and I have the ability to click on this anchor point and bring it down if I need to. Now notice that the trend line, now it's separated from the candlesticks if that's something you're looking for. The reason why we have that snap mode in there is because it helps you with precision in terms of attaching to a particular price on the candlestick. If I'm drawing from low to low, it makes it very convenient because I don't really have to be as precise as possible, because as long as I'm very close to that lowest low and I click, it'll attach to it perfectly aligned. Otherwise, you may be a little bit off. So snap mode, sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it will work against you depending on what is it that you're trying to do. If you want to do a floating trend line like I just did here, yes, snap mode is going to get in the way. But again, if I go back to drawing and I click on snap mode and I try to drag that trend line anchor point one more time, notice that it'll just snap over to the closest price on that vertical axis. Does that make sense? There's a few more things that you can do on Trendline, but the point here is, how do we draw trend lines programmatically using EasyLanguage? And you can see that, yes, we had to click on a begin point and an end point, and EasyLanguage does require that. So if you are going to programmatically draw trend lines on your chart, those are data points that you need. You need a date, a price, and you also need a time. Those are ways that you can identify a particular bar. And we need the time, maybe not so much here because we're looking at daily bars. So the time on every daily bar here is the same, which is the closing day of the session, 4 p.m. Eastern time. But if you were on an intraday, for example, like a 5-minute, every bar within the day will have a different time. So that's the reason why you need a date, time, and price for that first anchor point. And then you need a date, time, and price for the second anchor point, which will determine your trend line. Let me go and remove that trend line I just drew. Okay, and what we're going to do, we're going to simple code and show you how you can do it with EasyLanguage. I'm going to go to apps and go to EasyLanguage, and I'm going to work through the exercise as somebody that has never written EasyLanguage before, so that you can see how you can insert simple lines of text and get a reaction on the chart. I'm going to go here and click on new. This will be a new indicator. Okay, this is at MC, and I'm just going to call this trend line. It'll only be available for charting, so I can just uncheck radar screen so it doesn't clutter my list of studies in radar screen. I'm going to click OK. And if I'm not really familiar with how to program trend lines, I can tell you how to do it. But the point is for you to have resources, or enough resources that you can find the answers yourself. So how do I find information on how to draw a trend line here? What I would do is come over here to the dictionary. Over here on the right-hand side, I'm not sure why I have the properties like this, but on the right-hand side, you should have two tabs, one for dictionary and the other for properties. And these are tabs that will open up automatically if you hover over them. You hover over properties, properties. You hover over dictionary, dictionary. In this particular case, my dictionary, I'm going to pin it by using the pin or the auto hide feature here because I'm going to be looking at the dictionary for a moment. And one thing that I can do is in the search field right here, I can type in the word trendline and then go here to the green button. And then it just gives me information on trendline. Most of the results that you're going to get are going to be object-oriented EasyLanguage. As you work with the EasyLanguage, you're going to be able to identify the syntax for object-oriented EasyLanguage, which is a little bit more, I'm not going to say complicated, but a little bit more elaborate when it comes to the construction and the way that you build things. In here, I'm going to take a look at some trendline reserved word. For example, TL new is the reserved word that will generate a trend line. You can see here in the summary that it says creates a new trend line with listed start and end points. Here are the parameters. We already referenced the parameters for the trend line. We need a date, a time, and a value for that first anchor, and a date and a time and a value for the second anchor. As long as you align the parameters in the way that this reserved word needs them, it's going to draw a trend line for you. So look at the example right here. TL new creates a trend line from date 1, time 1, price 1 to date 2, time 2, price 2. And that's the way that you write the code inside of your EasyLanguage. Now, many times I can just copy and paste here. Let me copy this and paste it inside of my indicator. Of course, that doesn't mean anything to my code because EasyLanguage doesn't understand what D1, T1, P1, D2, doesn't know what that is because I haven't defined it. I have to define it up here and tell EasyLanguage what D1, T, what those parameters are. Now, of course, I can use real parameter or parameters that EasyLanguage does understand. Like, for example, I can say, instead of D1, I can say date, and I'm going to say, let me do 10 bars ago. By the way, if you are not aware of this, in order for you to make a historical reference of any price or data point, you put the number inside square brackets, and that's it. That's a historical reference. So what I'm saying here is grab the date from 10 bars ago. If EasyLanguage is calculating on every single bar, and you are on the most current bar, today's bar, and is calculating in real time, it's going to look back 10 bars from that point and grab the date of that other bar. And what I'm trying to do is create some separation for the trend line to be a little bit more visible. If I just go one bar back, you're going to get a little short line from yesterday's bar to today's bar. So I could make that longer if I wanted to. So that determines the length and how far back that line is going to start drawing. For time, I can do something very similar. Time, 10 bars ago, square brackets. Okay, and for the price, I can say, let's choose the close. Notice that the close, the date, and the time are words that turn blue. That means that EasyLanguage knows what they are. Those are reserved words in the language. And that's what I meant by replacing the parameters that we grabbed from the example with something that EasyLanguage does understand. And I'm going to do date. Let's remove this. Time. And then close. And I'm going to add a semicolon at the very end because that's just one statement. We finish the code. But notice that we're going from 10 bars ago to parameters that are right now. If you don't add a historical request square bracket, it'll just reference that current bar's date, the current bar time, and the current bar close. Let's go ahead and verify this. And one thing that one thing that you do have to understand for this type of syntax is that if you notice over here, this word cannot start a statement. TL for new is going to return an ID, which is it's a number. The ID is what identifies the trend line. And that number needs to be stored in some sort of container. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add one of the built-in containers that the language has, which is value 1. Value 1 all the way through value 99 are pre-built containers that you can use for you to store a particular value. And that's the nature of the TL underscore new. It returns a value, and it is a container where to store that value. That's the reason why it tells you that TL_new can add started statement. But now if I click on verify, notice that it verifies there's 0 errors because now it has that ability to put that ID into value 1. The ID is going to become important, especially if you start plotting multiple trend lines. You're going to need a way to identify those trend lines by the ID. But let's go ahead, and we already verified it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here to TradeStation to see what the behavior is. I'm going to come here and say studies, add study, and this is add MC trend line. I'm going to click OK, and this is what it looks like. Okay, a few things are happening here, and I'm going to explain so that we can know exactly what to expect and how to fix it. Of course, this is not my intended behavior. I wanted it just to be one single line. I knew this was going to happen because I've done it before, and I wanted you to see it, because a lot of times you find certain syntaxes or EasyLanguage syntax either online or in the dictionary. You want to use it, but it doesn't behave as you expect. So now the next step is, how do I refine it and how do I make it work? But the first thing that is happening here is that I have an open space at the bottom of my study. Whenever you create a custom study, by default, TradeStation is going to assume that indicator will act or will display on its own subgraph, separate from the candlesticks. We'll know the trend lines are automatically drawn on top of the candles, and that's something that you cannot change. But since we didn't change the scaling of the indicator, it assumes that it's going to plot something down here when it's not. So that's why there's an open space, because it's just waiting for you to specify what plots go down here. It drew the trend lines up here, but then you have the open space at the bottom. How do we fix this? How do we make the indicator just go on top of the bars? I'm going to go back here to my development environment, right click, go to properties. Here you access something called the scaling tab. Now the scaling needs to be set to, now it's set to right axis, but you have to set it to same axis as underlying data. And when I click OK, and I'm going to verify one more time. Remember that anytime that you make modifications to properties or the code, you need to verify the code one more time. On TradeStation, I have to remove the study. So let me go. Oh, notice something. When I click on one of the lines, notice that only one line is selected. And I can click on any of these lines. These are specific trend lines that are drawn. And you can see that I can click on any one. If I press delete on the keyboard, it's going to ask me, the drawing object was added by a study or by a strategy. Would you like to remove the study that created this drawing object? If I say yes, it'll remove the study. There we go. Now, I'm going to go back into studies and go to add study. Now go and select the trend line. Okay, here we go. Now we don't have that open space anymore at the bottom of the study. But another problem is happening is just the amount of trend lines that are recorded here on my chart. The reason why this is happening is because the EasyLanguage is designed to calculate on every single bar from the very beginning of the chart. Every beginning of the chart recalculates and says, hey, I have the ability to draw a trend line. I just have to go 10 bars back, find the close, and then draw from close to close. And it's doing that on every single bar. That's why on every single bar, you have a new trend line. If this is not what you were expecting, if what you were expecting is just for the current trading activity to go from close to close, then we can add something to the EasyLanguage. Something pretty simple. At the very top, we can say if last bar on chart. Make sure that when you use last bar on chart, your word turns up blue. Because if it doesn't, it just means that you typed it in incorrectly. Let me type it in here in the dictionary. Last bar on chart. And search. Let me click on the reserved word, and it says returns true when current bar is the last bar on the chart. Very handy function. And the way that it works is just precisely that. It'll just make sure that whatever it's under it, it's going to be performed on the last bar of the chart. If last bar on chart, then create the trend line. It's pretty much what we're saying. Don't do it historically. Just wait until the last bar of the chart and then draw that trend line. Let me verify that. Go back to my TradeStation, and here you go. So now you can see that my trend line is drawn from closing to closing. Now, of course, I mean, we could have just draw that same trend line we draw earlier. This is, we have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more bars in the background. So I'm going to say 15, and I'm going to go, yeah, let's go 15 bars back and go from low to low. So I can say, change this to 15. And instead of going to close, I can say to low. Notice that you can make those modifications on the fly. Let's verify that. And let's go back to TradeStation. And there we go. It goes from the low of that bar to the low of the current bar. If you want to go to a different bar, then of course you'd have to make those historical references, but we are keeping track of the current bar of the chart. Okay, perfect. So that's very simple, very straightforward. Now let me show you different variations of this so that we can change it around. One of the things that I do, in fact, let me go back here into my editor and type in the word trendline one more time, is that you can set the extend nature of the trend line. Where is it? Set extend left and set extend right. You can set the color and you can set the size. We can do all sorts of modifications. To do that, we can do an if-then block statement by just adding the word begin. Okay, so we do, first of all, we draw the trend line, and then we can say set, let me see how this is. Let's do set the extend. Set, there we go. Set extend left. Notice that you need the trend line ID and whether you want the extend to be true or not. So what I'm going to do here is set, actually the reserved word starts with the TL underscore set extend left. This plus doesn't go there. Make sure that when you type in that reserved word, it also comes up blue. If it doesn't turn blue, it's because there's a misspelling. So make sure that you check the spelling every time that it doesn't turn the color that you're expecting. I need the trend line ID. If you guys remember what we talked about IDs, whenever the trend line is created, it's going to generate an ID that is stored in value 1. At this point, I don't really know what the number of that trend line is, but I can use the container name and put it right here so that it references .id. That's one of the nice things about using these pre-built containers, that you can reference them at any point. And I'm going to say true for the extend left. And then we can do the same thing for extend right. Set ext right value 1 true. And then we have to type in an end because we had a begin. Always remember that, because if you said the word begin and don't close it with an end, you're going to get an error. We do the begin end whenever we have multiple actions. In this case, we're not only drawing the trend line, we're also setting parameters to that trend line, which is extending left and extending right. Let me go ahead and verify this. It tells me study not verified. The reason for it is because notice that my value 1 did not have the 1 in it. So let's go ahead and type it in and verify one more time. Okay, let's go back here to my chart and notice how the trend line now is not truncated from that low to the low. It's actually extending left and right. And you can do all sorts of different styling parameters. Like for example, I like to change the thickness. So I'm going to do TL set, I think it's size. It's a size or style? Let's see. If I choose style, no, it's not the style, it's the size. So the size from 0 to 6. Okay, I'm going to choose set size back here to the code for value 1, which is the trendline ID, and I'm going to set it to 4. Let's say TL underscore set color for that same trend line. We're going to set the color to yellow. Use one of the built-in colors. Let's verify that. Go back to my TradeStation, and now you can see that I've changed the size, the color, the extending capabilities, and the position of that trend line programmatically. Pretty interesting, right? So now it's just a matter of drilling down on the functionality of drawing trend lines and making sure that we grasp the concept. Many times, what I'd like to have in my code is the ability to draw different levels. When I think of a position that is open, sometimes I think of profit targets and stop losses that are generated based on ATR. So many times when I have a position open, I like to see those levels pretty much drawn on my graph, just to have a visual of where certain ATR levels would be. And that way, if you wanted to enter some orders, you would know exactly what those levels are. For example, let me remove this trend line. Before I do it, One of the nice things about this is that if you wanted to have a horizontal line instead, this is of course a sloping trend line, but if you wanted to have a horizontal line, all you need to do is to make sure that the prices are the same on both. So if you're using the low of 15 bars ago, and you want to set that as your horizontal line, just make sure that the low that you're using as a second anchor point is also referencing that same value. Now, if I verify this again, I go back to my TradeStation, you can see that I have a horizontal line exactly at the low of the 15th bar going back. Does that make sense? So very interesting in how you can just modify the trend line also to be a horizontal line. Let me remove that. Okay. And let's go back here to my code. My computer's starting to drag its feet again. So it's a little bit slow. Hopefully it'll keep on with me. So let's go ahead and do something. First of all, I'm gonna set a few trend lines, maybe at 2 targets and 1 stop. Let's not overcomplicate things, okay? Maybe the style, we can keep the style. That's something we can do. One thing that I want to start from the very beginning is my entry price. My entry price is something that can be configured manually. That's why I'm creating it as an input. At this point, I don't know what my entry price on my position is, but if I enter it here, I should be able to grab that value and calculate my levels based on ATR. For now, I'm going to set it to the close 1 bar ago, but just be mindful that you can change that at any moment. I'm going to create an input that says target 1 ATR. I'm going to set it to, let's do target 1. We'll do 2 ATRs. And then I will do target 2 ATR. I'm going to set this to 4. That means that I'm using 2 ATR calculations for the first target and then 2 ATRs for the second one. And the last one is going to be a stop ATR. And we're going to use 3 for this. Okay. So 2 ATRs for the first target, 4 ATRs for the second target. And then we're going to do the stop at 3 targets from my entry price. Okay. Does that make sense? Now my variables, these are the values that I'm going to be calculating. Notice that I misspelled variables and it didn't turn blue. My variables are going to be target 1, which is numeric. I'm going to initialize that to 0. I'm going to also calculate target 2, and I'm going to do a stop 1, just 1 stop, which I'm also initializing to 0. Does that make sense? Variables are just ways and you can create custom words that are going to store your calculations, okay? So I'm going to define those 3, target 1, okay, target 2, and then stop 1. So 3 different variables. Target 1 is going to be equal to, now this is where the calculation happens, my entry price, and then we're going to just add, we bring in the function for the average true range. Now I know that you can look it up here in the dictionary if you want to. Average true range is a function that I use a lot, so I know it by memory. It is AVG true range. You can see that it turns purple. Purple are the color from functions. Just make sure that it turns purple. And I'm using a 10-bar ATR. Okay, and we're gonna, so it doesn't move and calculate in real time, we're gonna reference all the bars, 10 bars, excluding today's bar. That's why we have a historical 1 bar back, so that you calculate it as of the closed bar. And we're going to multiply all this by target 1 ATR, which is the 2. Remember that we're using, it calculates the ATR calculation. In fact, let me go ahead and put this inside parentheses. So it calculates the average true range. Let me put this function inside parentheses as well. So here's the average true range calculation, then it multiplies it by the number of ATRs that you specified, and then that result is going to be added to my entry price. Does that make sense? Okay. For target 2, we're going to do something very similar. So I'm just going to copy this whole line and paste it right below, because it's exactly the same formula, except for it's going to multiply it by the ATRs that I specify on this input, which right now are set to 4. And the last one, it's going to be very similar too, but instead of adding, I'm going to subtract. And instead of using target 1 ATR, I'm going to use the stop ATRs. Does that make sense? Okay, pretty cool. Now I am going to do some, let's use it this way, and then we'll make some modifications, right? Okay, so now we have all the calculations, and now we just have to do the trend lines. Now you can do the setting of the colors for all the trend lines and whether they extend left and right. That's something you can do for each one of the lines or not. You know, we can just leave it as they are. In fact, I don't want these lines to extend. Maybe not. I don't want them to extend. The size, I do want them to be a little bit thicker. So let's set the size to 3 and the color depending on what trend line it is. Okay, so let's see what we're going to do. Remember, this is an example that we converted into a horizontal line because it's using the same price here. We're going to do something really similar, but in this case, I don't want the bar to go back that much. Maybe this is using 15, which is okay. We can do 10 bars. I just need a little bit of a line to show me what those levels are. So I'm just going to go 10 bars back to position the anchor point. But the price that I'm referencing here for this first line is target 1. So I'm going to grab that name. Target 1, remember that's going to calculate the price for me. There we go. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, I don't need to do the end yet because I want to do another line. So let me go here, copy this. I'm going to do another trend line. This will be value number 2. Remember to change value number 2 everywhere else. And instead of target 1, I'm going to use target 2. Target 2 and target 2. All right. And let's say that this line, instead of yellow, do we have gold? No. Orange? Orange is not a color. Let's do the first one. Let's make it green. Okay. The second one, we'll make it yellow. And the third one, which is the stop, we'll make it red. So value number 3 for the stop, this is going to be stop 1. Remember that is the same syntax. And we need to make sure that this has value or a reference to value number 3. And we're going to make this red. So green, yellow, red. Those are the 3 colors that I'm plotting. And then all I need to do is type in the word end. So that only happens on the last bar. It begins this and then it plots the lines for me. Interesting. Let's go ahead and verify this. It verifies successful. So let me go ahead and take a look at my chart. Did I remove the indicator? I did. Let me go back to studies, add studies, and let's go here to add MC trend line. Okay, here we go. Now we have these lines that are drawn automatically and programmatically based on ATRs. Of course, it's using 10 bars back to calculate the ATR. The first target is 2 ATRs. The second target is 4 ATRs. And the stop right here is 3 ATRs as we specified. Of course, these can be configured differently. Now, right now, I don't have a text indicator letting me know what the price is exactly. I can also round these values up to the next dollar or maybe the next $5, depending on how I want this to be modified. There's a lot of things that I can do to the numbers and the calculations to make it behave the way that I want. One of the things that I did here is because I didn't want these to be on a very odd number, like with cents. I wanted to round this up to maybe the next dollar or the next quarter so that I can have a more even price. Not that you would need it, but if you go back here to my code, let me go here to my EasyLanguage. In the calculation of the target and the ATR, there is a function that's called round to nearest, and you can put this whole expression. Let me move this out of the way. I don't need it anymore. So you can do round to nearest, open parentheses, and then put the whole expression, and then you can add a 1 at the very end if you wanted to round it to the next dollar. If you wanted to add it to the next quarter, that would be 0.25. Let me go ahead and do the same thing here on my target. Open up parentheses, and then close parentheses here, 1, and close parentheses one more time. Okay, we do the same thing for all my calculations. Close parentheses here, comma, and 1. All right, let's verify this. Oh, not verified. I think I have one too many parentheses. Yeah, maybe. So I just needed the one at the very end. I did way too many parentheses. So this one at the very end is more than enough. So this one needs to go. There we go. Yeah, one of the things that EasyLanguage cares about is matching parentheses. So the same number of opening parentheses that you have should match the same number of closing parentheses. When there's a mismatch, you get an error, just like the one I just did. So now let me go back here to my chart. And now these lines, let me go ahead and remove them so that I can make sure that they're aligned at $1. So let me go back here to studies, add studies, select trend line, and here it is. If I were to draw an imaginary line here, you can see that trend line is exactly at 219. If I were to round it to the next $5, I could to align to my scale here. But one of the things, I don't do this often, but if I go here to style and I go to, because I like to see a little bit more detail in my scale. So if I go to the chart scaling and I customize, I can set a custom axis increment and I'm going to set it to $1. Okay. See, that adds a little bit more visibility in my time scale or my price scale. I'm sorry. So if at any point you wanted to have more detail, now I can reference that line is exactly at 226. The green line is 219 and the red line is at 203. If I'm using those rounded numbers, because that's what I elected. I wanted those numbers to be rounded to the nearest $1. Okay, guys, that's my class for today. Hopefully you were able to follow. I know that if you're new to EasyLanguage, this may be a little bit complex, but the more you use it, the more you'll see that you have this power within your hands to modify and create indicators that are exactly what you're looking them to be. All right, that's my class for today. Let me go ahead and share my email address right here in the chat. Please send me an email if you'd like a copy of this code, or if you'd like to ask me any other question about the educational content. It's a great pleasure to be here. Please check our events calendar for upcoming topics. Thank you for your support and have a great afternoon. Goodbye, everyone.